Hi, so we're wrapping things up. Can you believe it? We're into week 8, or on your way to week 8, depending on when you're viewing this video. And the last thing you have to do, other than maybe catch up, is to turn in your final project. We devoted the last week of the class to getting that in, turning it in, doing the work, of course, to turn in a great project, but also taking some time for you all to reflect on each other's work. So if I've set it up properly at Blackboard, I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that. So to wrap everything up, I thought we'd start by reminding ourselves what this class is about. And the final project is really in lieu of a final exam. So I'm hoping that in your final project you'll be able to bring together a lot of the ideas we've been talking about. So back to the syllabus to see at least what we hoped to do. You don't always get everything done you want to get done in a course, right? Neither the professor nor the students. But just let's take a look and see what we had hoped to do. So in this course we said, here's the course description. From the Greek theater to the Roman Colosseum, ancient city-states provided both the venues and the talent to educate, entertain, and motivate their citizens. The tradition continues to this day as a hallmark of what it means to be cultured or civilized. And I put those terms in quotations because those are terms that can be interpreted in different ways. So we have to be careful about that. Communities have dedicated public space and funding to support the arts and entertainment as an expression of civic identity. Yeah, and I think that you guys have been really addressing those issues in your discussion boards really well and in other places. This course examines a variety of ways that cities have used public space and funding to support such activities. What have cities done? How have cities done this in the past? Why have they done it? How and why has the tradition continued? How do we determine the sort of public art and entertainment that is suitable for public space? You've been talking about that with some of our controversies, particularly public art in, I believe that was Andover, no, not Andover, sorry, Overland Park in Kansas, and also, of course, graffiti. So what's suitable for such space? How do such displays confirm and create culture that links us together? You've all been looking at those in most of your presentations that I've been reading. How do these displays, how do these events connect us? How do we experience such displays as a community? That gets us to that transcendence concept. So if I could just say in review, from Greece, we looked at the play Antigone, and there we see storytelling in a theatrical setting. Your editor for Antigone reminds us that Sophocles didn't invent the story of Antigone, but he did change it a bit to suit his needs and his play. So storytelling in theater, creative storytelling, brought up ethical issues, spiritual issues, political questions in a democracy. Rome, we focused on the gladiator contests in particular, but there were certainly other entertainments in very, very large venues. These megastructures were built with funding from the empire, deliberately funded by the leadership of this empire, by the emperor himself. These great megastructures and the events that happened there tried to invoke, according to our reading on gladiators, according to Hopkins, tried to invoke pride in our culture, perhaps even a bit of fear of government, but also some kind of participation, some kind of political theater, he would call this, participating where you sat, participating in sort of yelling out jeers towards the emperor. This venue could also invoke patriotism. Some of you have talked about things like organized sports today with regard to football or baseball, and that somehow that's a community event that reminds us of who we are as a group. Certainly with the Romans and their events, they tried to do that. We went on to London and we talked about issues of theater, how the culture of the city inspired the artist, this artist being Shakespeare, how he in turn through his work may have inspired the city, His works, his plays certainly have comedy and tragedy that relate to elements from the ancient past, because he did enjoy reading ancient plays. We know this. But also in his histories, he wrote plays that were histories. Those also invoked a sort of patriotism for England itself. He's doing a bit of creolizing in that he is bringing together ancient themes, ancient stories, even some from Sophocles, and he's making them English to tell the new English stories. Also in that section on London, we get an understanding of some of the laws regarding public morality and how government was concerned that theaters were bad places for people to go. And so we get this combination of government regulation, but also this concern about public attitudes, public morality. If you get a large number of people together in a theater in London, might you incite them to riot against the government? So again, this idea of political issues coming forward in entertainment. We went to the United States and we went to North America. We went to the American Parade, which was sort of a spontaneous civic celebration using civic space. In this case, the long streets of New York or San Francisco or New Orleans, because there wasn't public space large enough, like the Colosseum, in these places where you could get a huge amount of your population together to sort of celebrate a community event, community pride, community history. So we talked a little bit about that. And then also, many of you addressed the idea of how by seeing it, analyzing the parade itself, you can see changes in a community reflected in the parade. You can see the parade perhaps teaching us stories about who we are, teaching us lessons about who we are as well. So we get like a smaller version of those gladiator games, right, where we're trying to sort of talk about who we are, but in a very small space in comparison, just walking on the street. It is also interesting that people who might have been originally spectators for a great city event now become participants, creating the event themselves. So a very interesting development with that American Parade. We've talked about the graffiti element too, that the graffiti in the American city, particularly New York, is an event or an idea or a movement or a nuisance that involves civic space, individuals within the city trying to express themselves in some fashion, right? It could be just basic communication. It could be artistic. It could be annoying vandalism. Whatever it is, it certainly reflects the time, the space in which these people lived who were creating these images. You're also taking a look at, if you haven't finished it already, the significant economic arguments about the arts and big-scale entertainment in a city. And the test case for us was Katrina. Katrina in New Orleans. And the economists there trying to give us an understanding of what does it actually take to get one of these mega venues in place? What does it actually take to maintain them? And who are all the various financial players, from the owners of the New Orleans Saints, in this case, the football team, to the city council, to the state, to the middle class, to education issues. All of these things start to show us in that one article on should we rebuild the New Orleans Superdome, that shows all the different complexities coming in, how a great venue like the Superdome, like Intrust Arena, like any of the stadiums in any of our great cities, what kind of economic impact do they have on a city, but also taking it further, what kind of psychological impact, what kind of community unity impact, given that we have noticed, we have seen how the Superdome can create a certain kind of identity, a certain kind of optimism for a community. What's the economic value on that if we're not really ever going to get, as Matheson and Bade say, a decent return on our investment? for the amount of money it takes to build one of these venues, if it's not a financial return, maybe it's something else. And maybe that's important. Again, controversial. You living in a democracy, living in North America, have these things to consider when you're attempting to influence your policymakers, your decision makers. Finally, you have the element of Horrocks. Horrocks takes this full circle, right? He is talking about moving us into the future with public space. And not only moving us into the future with public space, physical public space, but also thinking about, in the age in which we live, of electronic images, electronic communication, virtual communities, blogs, entertainment online. How do we maintain our community connections? How do we build in a creative fashion? How can we plan creatively space that is both physical and virtual, that allows us to be community members, that allows us to be responsible citizens as we move further into the 21st century? When I read Horrocks and I think about some of the issues he's bringing up, I immediately go back all the way to Antigone. What does it mean to be a citizen living in a community? How do we communicate our ideas about the world? How do we communicate our ideas about our community? How do we live virtuously and responsibly as a member of a community? Again, all of that to me goes right back to Antigone. So that's what we've been doing in this class. We have been checking out all of these ideas and sort of hinging them on the city, right? All of these big issues, these big questions about art, entertainment, ethics, political involvement, social classes, right? You saw social classes at Rome, you saw social classes in the parade. We're trying to pull all this together and hinge it on this one focal point of the city and arts and entertainment. So your final project asks you to narrow it even further and get to one piece of that element, one piece. And so here's our little checklist for your final project that's due in week 8. As you know, and I've said it a million times, sorry, we're going to do it once more. You were to come up with an example of a city-supported arts or entertainment that helps to define the identity of the city and the community that supports it. Please keep in mind, if you started off with one idea and you've seen it evolve over the course of these weeks, that's absolutely what's supposed to happen. So don't feel like you're abandoning something just because you're tweaking it or you're moving towards a little bit different space. You were to find the resources, the economic resources that support this venue. Find the money. In your final project, you might ask the question, you might suggest, is this money well spent? Is this a good use of public funds? You have either turned it in or you're anticipating turning in your process paper. The process paper allows you to show your work. This is where you pull together steps 1 and 2 that we just talked about, the example and the money. And then you are going to incorporate the objectives of the creative spirit that we have in our class. You're picking 3. And you're going to show how your project helps you to address those objectives. You're also going to make connections to your coursework. You're going to make connections to your readings. You're going to make connections to discussions, to ideas that maybe some of your colleagues came forward with, maybe some of the projects you've done, right? Whether it's the Creolizing project or your Out and About project. You're going to try to pull these things together. If not the actual work, not the actual writing that you've already done, which you can certainly steal from yourself, the ideas that have bubbled up, the ideas that have come to mind as you've been working on these things. So your process paper, pulling together steps 1 and 2, pulling together the objectives for this course, pulling together the connections that you're making to those objectives, and then what other connections are you making to your readings? Right, that's your process paper. The final element of that process paper is then your final reflection. You may do a PowerPoint, a video, a poem. Why did you choose that particular kind of expression to get your points across, get your work across? Your final part of this process paper, which is due July 30th, week 8, is to put together your project, right? And for some of you, this may be, and it's for presentation purposes. If we were in class, I would have each of you do a presentation, a 10-minute presentation, if you will. What did you find out? And then we would have the opportunity to talk to you, ask you questions, but we're not in class. So what you should do, please, is put together a reflection. It may be a video, it may be a PowerPoint. It can be very creative. It might be a paper. It might simply be a paper. But the idea here is you put together a final, polished presentation that incorporates everything you've done, and in any fashion you like. I don't want to put any particular breaks on you. I want this to be your project. You are then going to share that with the rest of us. I've set up groups at Blackboard. So if you go to Blackboard and you go to the left-hand column and you look for groups, click on that. You should find your group. You will have the opportunity, the option to upload your project to that group area, please, by July 30th. And then you will be able to look at everyone else's projects in that group area. You may, please, if it's helpful, keep in mind that I've been reading your project all along, but your colleagues haven't, right? So put there your process paper. Put there your final project. In fact, I would suggest you put both the process paper and the final project there. But put those there. Any images you may have, again, videos, songs, descriptions of anything that you find very important to get your ideas across, right? Put those there. So that's due July 30th. Then you'll have a day or two to go through and review 2 projects of your colleagues. 2 things, go to that group, look at 2 projects there. And at Blackboard, in week 8, there is a survey. There is a final project survey, a final project assessment. And for each person that you review, please go through that survey. There's an option for you to put their name and the title of their project. Go through and look at all the things that are there, and that will give you the opportunity to assess that project. There is, in the final question, the opportunity to say, ooh, this would have been so much more effective if only you had done this. Or you have the option to say, ooh, I have a question. How did you come to do X? So you do have the opportunity to do that as well. I will then get that information to the person whose project you reviewed. Right? The other thing to consider on that survey is that it would be very good of you to look at that survey itself before you finish your final project. Because that survey, which you can go in and look at, there are unlimited opportunities to do so, ask you to evaluate this person's project on grammar. Does it have a thesis? Does the project hold together? Are there good, sound, critical arguments? Is there support? Is there evidence? What are the goals that this person addressed, and how did they address them? On the creative side, were the images interesting, if there were images? Was the work done in a manner that was attractive, that was appealing? The reason I suggest you look at that before you do your final project is that that survey will be the rubric that I will use to assess your project as well. Right? Sometimes people say, ooh, what are you looking for in this final project? Take a look at that survey. That's what I'm looking for. And that's what you should be looking for in your colleagues' works too, as well as your own. So, thanks for paying attention here. Of course, you can review this video as many times as you need to. I've enjoyed having you in class. This has been an interesting experiment for me to do a course like this online. Please email questions. Please let me know. I will tell you that what will be the date? This will be July 23rd. Yes, July 23rd. I will not have office hours. I won't physically be in my office. I will certainly be checking email. I'll be out of town that day, but I will certainly be checking emails, etc., but I won't physically be there. So if you call me on July 23rd, I think that's normally the Wednesday, I won't physically be there, but do feel free to email, ask questions along the way. Other than that, thank you for your time and participating in this class. I've enjoyed emailing with you and talking with you, some of you on the phone, some of you via email, some of you even in person. So thank you for that. And I hope that you will see soon a survey coming to you from Sister Joanne Mark asking you to rate this class. I hope you will take the time to do that and offer any and all suggestions as to how we can make this a better experience. So thank you so much for your time. I hope you made it all the way to the end of this video. Please email me and let me know if you have any questions whatsoever. Thanks.